then she did the company, wasn't just this. She literally just came in without really knowing that she was a great business. Yeah, because I felt like she gave us.
That's the blind there.
Yeah, she gave us like the yeah. I'm going to do Starbucks just because I took a lot of my results.
Oh, yeah. No. Is it merit or?
No.
Just face this here so I have a glimpse of what's on the screen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is this a size of? No one's coming in. How many more do you have for the rest of the year? No, how many more guests?
They're doing the opposite, so they're doing like Starbucks and like Amazon. But I want to still do this. High street there, online, so I can focus on the online stuff as like contrast and compare it to high street.
Good. Right guys, thanks for turning up. Once again, one man and a dog, and we've got this set up. Okay. This is Kunle Campbell. He's a good friend of mine. We've been friends for many years now. He's from 2XEcommerce. He used to run a company called Fuzzman Media. So he's very experienced in e-commerce, and he runs a talk show as well. He's a talk show host for a blog. Is that about right?
Yeah.
And various other things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks, Kunle.
Hi guys, thanks for turning up. I'm Kunle. I've been into digital actually from university about 11 years, for about 11 years, 2012 now. It's 11, yeah. In 2004. And I got into this whole e-commerce or e-business management, worked in the capacity of a web marketing manager for a few years, became a consultant largely for driving traffic to all sorts of websites. And then about 4 years ago I decided, okay, I'm a bit too general and I need to focus, so I honed in on e-commerce. And I started out with generating more traffic to e-commerce, and now I'm more about the business models, as in how do we sort of grow from 0 to 10 million, or how do we grow from 5 to 20. So it's all about growth in e-commerce, if that makes sense. I hope this will work. Let's see. Let's try to turn my mouse to a click there. Never done it before. Okay, it works. So, as I said, well, as Greg alluded to, I run a podcast, and I've had about 50 episodes so far, and most of them have been with leaders in e-commerce in general. I've spoken to people who run subscription commerce businesses through to people who sell on Amazon, for instance. It's 2XEcommerce.com. If you're on iTunes, subscribe, listen. It's broadcast every Tuesday. I run workshops, I speak at events, and that's pretty much me. I like to run and I do coffee. Well, today I want to kind of cover or give you kind of like an understanding of what e-commerce is all about. So I don't know, who's interested here in e-commerce? Okay, all right, in what capacity? In founding, or who's interested in joining an e-commerce company at some point after university or even in university? What about founding something, starting something up? Because they're kind of like two options. You either work for an e-commerce business or you start something up. So what I want to really take you guys through today is more or less the landscape, so you have a better understanding of what online retail has to offer. So you know the options out there, you kind of understand the players. You know what's going on in the most dynamic market, e-commerce markets on the planet now, well, bar China, but USA, what's going on. Those trends tend to trickle down to the UK eventually, where like there's a 1 or 2 year delay in what's going on in America now to what's going to take off here in the UK. So I want to kind of take us through, it's a general view, but I hope your takeaway would be, wow, okay, these and these and this are the kinds of e-commerce businesses around, and when you're faced with decisions, you make the right choices, right? Okay, so I'll just start out with the US e-commerce market. Only data I have is up to 2003 through to 2014, so about 11 years of data. Notice the gap from here, say from here, 2004 to 2007, it doubled. 2007, again, to about 2010, it doubled. And it's almost doubled again from 2009 to 2014. And the reasons for this, there are like 3 phases of like e-commerce, in general, 3 phases of the e-commerce industry in general. So it's pretty much what I said. In the UK, it's been more steady. So 11 million here for 14 and a half here. It doubled in 2006. The next time it's really doubled was in 2010, and from 2010 in 2014 it doubled. One caveat here is the data here is not just retail as we know it, so it also includes things like buying train tickets or travel. So yeah, it's inflated in a way. It's every sort of transaction that's gone on the internet, basically. Anytime you pull out your credit card and debit card and pay for something, this is kind of like an idea of the scale of the industry. So the industry at the moment is worth about 104 billion. This Black Friday might be our first £1 billion sales day on a Black Friday, which is enormous, big for the UK. Although China did that in 8 minutes on Alibaba alone a few days ago, 2 days ago. But it's still fascinating, still huge, and there's growth, there's opportunity. So I'll just take you back like 30 years ago, in the late 90s, 2000, first generation of e-commerce businesses. The Amazons, the eBays, some have stayed with us, others have left. eToys, Alibaba, Kitbag UK, Blue Nile is still around, Buy.com is around. I think it's been bought by Rakuten, a Japanese marketplace. But yeah, you get the idea. It was dial-up, and what we were trying to do was, the idea really was like, a lot of stuff is going on offline, and let's try and bring offline online. That was just kind of, they didn't really think about it. People could wait for 30 days to get their books delivered. They didn't care. It was just like magic, the fact that you could sit down on the comforts of your desk, or your desk, your computer, and click, 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 take a few clicks and get something ordered to your doorstep. No one was really ready for it, but yeah, it was pre the .com, there were lots of ideas, and there were few survivors. Second generation, I think it started, it was just after the .com, so there was reality started to bite and trickle in. And then there were a new sort of breed of e-commerce businesses. Some of you might recognize them, Net-a-Porter. Zappos was bought by Amazon eventually. And these guys started to care more about customer service and experience. They started to care about being different, variety. And decided to improve on logistics, on user experience, UX, user experience. And yeah, and broadband started to speed up, speed and accessibility started to speed up. So these guys, improved on what the pioneers, started. And then third generation was more about how we're going to create experiences never even that do not even exist online, in the real world. So the previous two were pretty much improving, real world experiences, but these guys now were like, okay, let's rethink everything and let's create new online experiences that are natively online. Obviously, there's whatever the first and second generation had done, they were building up on it. But yeah, and I'm going to be talking about these breed of companies, these breed of third generation companies. And if you track back to the growth, these were like the 2009. These are what some of the e-commerce businesses that were set up funded in 2009 that actually had a massive impact. This is for all you HTML web people. It kind of again matches in terms of technology. So on the background, the technology actually drives these e-commerce businesses. There's Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and Web 3.0. Again, this is kind of more static web, transactional. Is that me? Sorry, I just need to see if it's me making that. I'll just do that and can you see it? Okay. From current slide, yeah. Ouch.
It's back.
It's back. Okay.
Yeah.
See all my emails. Okay. So yeah, transactional, social. Remember social media. After social came the mobile web, as we know it. So there's some kind of like mobile native, e-commerce businesses, or they're very, very mobile centric, I'll say. And then there's semantic web, which is more or less about relationships, objects. But I'm not going to go through all this, but just be aware that as models have changed, technology behind them have also, changed. Right. Okay, so what I want to talk about are membership-driven sites, right? So subscription commerce. Wants to take you through things like concepts like replenishables, product discovery, try before you buy, personalized fashion shopping. Some of you might be subscribers to services. Time-limited flash sales. I'm going to go through all of this. Pop shops, experiential. So pop shops. Sometimes you could see a pop shop, a pair around the corner. Try before you buy. International e-commerce, direct to consumer. I'm going to talk about all of this basically. But before I talk about everything, I'm going to talk about Amazon because Amazon is the 800-pound gorilla, in the e-commerce or retail space at the moment. And that's because 44%. Well, actually, let me ask: how many of us shop on Amazon? Like have Amazon accounts? Okay. When last did you buy from Amazon?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Okay. Anybody for yesterday this week? You, okay, right. That's because 44% of every product search in the world basically starts from Amazon. It's crazy. Well, USA, sorry, not the world, USA. This starts in the US. And it would be similar to the UK, right? Which is crazy. I know people I interviewed someone last week who does $10 million a year on Amazon, and he sells, what does he sell? He sells vacuum cleaner accessories, like the white label type stuff. He just sells that. He started his business in 2008, and his parents' business was failing. He took it up, connected with the suppliers, and he set stuff up. It's easy to, and again, one of the things that really helped Amazon is the fact that we can now go to China, we could design products here in the UK, go to China and get our products manufactured in China, bring them to the USA, bring them to the UK, and we have a market. All you need to do is try and build something or make something or invent something better than what's already there. And Amazon is a marketplace. There is a market, in Amazon already of people who just want to bring out their credit cards and pay. So there's a paying audience on Amazon. And then 34% start their search on Google, which is interesting. Eric Schmidt, Google's executive chairman, actually said, people think Bing and Yahoo are our competitors, but Amazon is actually our competitor. He said it earlier this year or last year, which speaks volumes. I'm not going to go too deep into Amazon, but it's something to be aware of, especially if you're an entrepreneur or maybe you're thinking about career opportunities online and you want to, sort of work for one of the biggest players, and just be aware that Amazon is the big daddy, so to speak. Okay, so let's start to go through all the other businesses, right? Now, traditionally, people will have, when you want something, you typically go into an engine of sorts, whether it's Google or Amazon, and you search for, okay, where can I, get cheap batteries, or where can I get whatever, whatever you're looking for. But what's starting to happen, or what started to happen in 2009 to date, is people are thinking about building brands, right? People just don't want to allow mammoths like Google and Amazon to be the gateway to their business. They don't want them to own the shopping mall. They want you to just type into Google their brand name and get access to them, because their brand is synonymous to a certain concept, if that makes sense, rather than having to compete for a pool of keywords or search phrases for access to them. So they invest a lot into building their brand. So it's now very common for them to start buying advertising on television to educate and build their brand, because that metric of your brand name, to me, well, I always tell my clients, is an asset, right? It's a big asset. So one of the concepts to bear in mind is so prior to like last year, I'd always been a customer acquisition type of person, where I'd be like, how much traffic can I bring into a website? But to be honest, right, in a lot of businesses, that first transaction will not be profitable. They might lose money on that first transaction. What they want you to do is get hooked, basically. They're trying to sell you a habit. So when you think about, you guys go to shopping malls and you buy stuff, you have your various styles, you could be goth, you could be pop, you could be anything, right? There are certain stores that would embody your style, right? And you tend to gravitate towards those stores, right? So what I'm saying in essence is being top of mind and creating let me step back a bit. So what I'm saying in essence is basically that first purchase is they try and build as much experience into that first purchase, so you become their customers for a long time. So they're trying to maximize their customer lifetime value. So a model like subscription commerce starts to make sense, because you pay a certain amount of money, like for your mobile phone, and you're hooked. You more or less pay them, and they could calculate the scale of their business, basically, based on subscription business. Now, Graze, which is the example here I'll talk about, is a UK company. Now, within subscription e-commerce, there are three models that have started to emerge. One is, I'd say there are two, and this is kind of like an experience, right? So these are the two major, this is an experience. So the two major are replenishables. Man Packs, for instance, they sell men's underwear. They give you every quarter. Men don't think about it sometimes. Dollar Shave Club, they send shaving sticks on a monthly basis to you and they're really cheap. They've taken a lot of market share from Gillette. Huge. I can't quite remember the numbers, but it's significant. Coffee, it's a replenishable. I love coffee. Actually, that's a mug coffee there. So coffee again, that's another replenishable, right? So people are building, it requires a lot of money to go into replenishables, as you can imagine, because stock would be an issue, right? Product discovery engines are slightly different. Birchbox, who's heard of Birchbox? Right, okay, so, right, you know that they're in America, I'm not sure if they're in the UK, cosmetics, female and male cosmetics. What they do is, they allow you sample, right? They send you a box, and you sample, you experience, you discover new brands in sample. And then from there, what happens, there's always this surprise and delight, try before you buy element to it, but you will sample these items and eventually you could purchase. Now, Grays do something different. They own the entire supply chain, right? So they're not going on behalf of brands and putting other brands into their boxes. What Grays is doing is more or less manufacturing healthy foods, learning more about you. So if you're a vegan, they would send stuff to you. You give them feedback, and they would never send stuff you don't like to them till they optimize exactly what you like, and you're kind of hooked. So they get you. I think they have like 800 products they can make at any one time. It's just the range they have is so wide. But they own one core thing you have to bear in mind is they own food manufacturing facilities, and they have scientists working for them. So it's quite intellectually and capital intensive. Grays.com. They've actually gone to the US now. Backbox is quite interesting. They're more for dog lovers, and it's just a box with stuff your dog might or might not like for about $10 a month or thereabouts. Pet lovers, people love their pets. People love their pets. I love cats. So that's just the way it is. So yeah, that's product discovery. And then the try before you go product demoing really is these guys offer you the opportunity before you actually pay to experience the products. So some of you might have heard of Warby Parker. Turning out, I think it's a service that allows you almost rent pieces of art for your apartment, and then it's just on a rotation basis. If you're like entrepreneurially minded, I would advise that you read blogs like TechCrunch. You check sites like Angel Lists, and you also listen to podcasts to know what's going on around you. So that gives you ideas, but that gives you ideas basically to know what you want to do. And then Trunk Club is more or less, men don't tend to have fashion sense. Well, some men, and these guys will style you, and they'll send you stuff every other month or so you can wear based on your preference, right? So this is kind of like a matrix of e-commerce in the sense that Amazon, if you look at the boxes, stuff, one x-axis, one scale, and down there is new, beta, it's slightly old. This is male and this is female, right? Amazon is doing stuff with scale, and it cuts across all pretty much up there. Man Packs is male demoing, and it's relatively new. And at the other end of the scale, that's Citrus Lane. I don't know what Citrus Lane is. Birchbox is there. Shoe Dazzle is there. They've shut down, but Birchbox is now male and female.
Can you just break down what you mean by scale? I'm sure
Scale is growth, just size. Revenue. So revenue, big, small. Makes sense. It's a better one. Again, Amazon scale, male, female demo. This from Kissmetrics, right? So further down there, so you see Backbox, I think, it's another box, Citrus Lane, all that. this. I'll remove it. So that's Dollar Shave Club. 2012 founded, 4 million. What launched them was a video on YouTube. Who's seen the Dollar Shave Club video? Yeah. That attracted investors to their business, and they were able to, with a video which is fascinating, launch their business. And well, the video is just the top of the iceberg. There's a lot of work that went into building this business. 9 million, 65, they doubled. That's just market size. It's just crazy. So they're actually seizing Gillette territory. They're taking territory here. And because it's a new way, it's cheap, it's convenient, and it's disruptive. And that's what you need to think about with these models. It's all about that whole startup philosophy. We're not building corner shops or sweet shops around the corner. We're building stuff at scale. That mindset of building stuff at scale. How am I going to disrupt something? And one thing you have to bear in mind again is you can never be an Amazon, right? Unless you have billions and billions of dollars. But you can be the next most disruptive business that sells yoga pants, for instance, just yoga wear. Because verticals are waiting to be disrupted rather than the entire industry.
What are verticals?
Verticals are just industries like yoga, in sports, running. Even within running, it could be men's running, it could be mod running. It's just verticals in sectors in retail. So one gripe I have with retail, especially with stats across retail, is you just see retail as a sector. But within retail, you have, even in fashion retail, you have stuff like luxury fashion, and you have fast fashion. So Boohoo.com is fast fashion, and luxury fashion is Net-a-Porter. And the distinction really needs to be made, in retail, because there's so much going on, and each vertical in itself can be disrupted. So ASOS and Boohoo.com, for instance, are fighting for the same territory. They're competitors. ASOS is not competing against Net-a-Porter or Louis Vuitton.com or even John Lewis. They're competing for the 18 to 24-year-old demographic. That makes sense. So yeah, that's Dollar Shave Club. A few things you want to know about Dollar Shave Club. Subscription commerce business controls 66% of, that can be right, yeah. But yeah, the shaving industry in America is $13 billion, and that's their revenue. They're growing, they're a fast-growing business. Anyway, and they now sell shave butter, post-shave moisturizers, and butt wipes for men. Right, that's Manpacks. I've spoken to you about it already, so I'll move really quickly on that. Now, what's quite interesting is Amazon. This is an Amazon page. This is Gillette. What do they have here? Subscribe. So this is replenishable, and if I shave that often, I will, and I have affinity with this brand. I would most likely just hit subscribe because it's so convenient for me, right? So one thing I said was like, why the heck is the site like this, which is drugstore.com? Why don't they have it? So if you have an e-commerce business and you're seeing a trend in repeat business, why don't you just make it so convenient for your customers? And that's also guaranteeing you, long income stream. Why don't you just have a subscribe button, there, right there and then. Anyway, so what's the takeaways here is, if you ever think about building, an e-commerce business, think about the long, the long game, long term, and the only way you're going to build something of scale is if you have repeats. In most cases, if you have repeat business, if you have repeat customers, that's how businesses thrive. If you go to a Zara, some people, the moment they get their paycheck, they're there again and again and again and again. So yeah, just this is Amazon. people thought it was a gimmick, but they've actually, with the data they've got, they created this button, basically, which you stick your kitchen wall or kitchen notice board or kitchen blackboard or whatever your I think they're magnets, I think. And with just by pressing it, because it's linked to accounts, it just reorders for you. You don't need to do anything. You just press it, reorders it.
Just make sure it's our child file.
Exactly, just put it right up there. Right, but yeah, this is very handy for parents, and this, we run Russian liquid. Yeah, so product discovery and curation. I've talked about Grays. It's just a variety. They fascinate me, and I'm so proud of them because they were started out here in the UK. They've expanded to the US. And yeah, they're totally different. They are aggressive on acquisition, and also their retention business. So they want to retain their customers, but they're not just taking stuff from Cadbury and other food manufacturers. They're doing it from scratch, and it's actually serving a need in the market. People find it difficult looking for snacks if you have. If you have a nutrition requirement, if you're gluten, if you're gluten intolerant, exactly. So yeah, you've got protein, nuts. It's variety really when you think about it. And this is how they've sort of grown. 8 million, 21, double, quite double there. I think this is when they moved to the US. One other thing is, yeah. You need to think about, that would be for another presentation, but one just quick point is, just don't think about UK. Think about Europe, which I believe is the biggest market in the world, but the challenge with Europe is language, right? And just as much as it's in the geographic area. It's different from America, where everybody feels American in that sense. Yeah, businesses do double when they think internationally. Okay. This is a couple categories. It's US based, and they do pretty much the same thing. Sparkbox I mentioned earlier. $29, not 10. Sorry. Still. It's a fast-growing business, over 20,000 members, $100 million in revenue, not bad. The one caveat really is a lot of these businesses are funded, but you need to kind of sort of test the market. So there's something called like the lean startup methodology, where you at least prove there's a market for it, and then you take it to investors and you say, okay, look, this worked, with my $1,000 or whatever, and because this worked, I think you guys could give us a few $100,000 and we'll take it to the next level, and it just starts to build up from there and there and there till you build something like this. I'm not going to talk about this. I talked about this again. Just beauty, grooming. This is Naked Wines. Fascinating. I wrote on my blog. It was a deep dive on how these guys do their marketing, and it's just amazing. They're a wine club, and it's run by Richard Gromney, yes, and it's so you pretty much pay £20 a month, and they'll send you build up credits in your account, and once you build up credits in your account, you can buy a case of wine off the back of the credit you've built up, and I think cases start from about £60. It's cheaper, much cheaper than going to supermarkets. They disrupted that market, they've gained market share, and what's fascinating is there was so much of a nuisance in the wine industry in the UK. Majestic Wines bought them early this year. As in, they were so disruptive. They expanded to the US. They're like a wine club, but everything is so personal. There's a guy called Emon, I think, and it's like my neighbor is talking to me in the emails, and he just nudges you to you should just type out 2XEcommerce naked wines on Google and just read what they do. It's so clever, not just from the acquisition standpoint, but how they retain customers. I've been a customer of theirs for about 3 years now, and I really have no gripe. And what they've also done is they've improved the experience, not just the experience on their website in regards to the convenience to purchasing, but also deliverability. If I order today, I will get stuff, my case of wine tomorrow. And I think in parts of London they could do same day. And not only that, they also do tours. So they come to your town at some point, or your city, and there'll be a wine tasting event which you can join and meet other naked winers. So they're building a community around their business. So it's fascinating. It's really interesting to look at. But I'll just so in my opinion, naked wines is also a subscription commerce business. You don't get stuff, every day, but when you look at the back end of their business, they know exactly what's going to come in, next month, because they know how many subscribers they have. They're not kind of leaving anything to chance, like what's Google algorithm today or tomorrow. Actually, hardly anybody searches for the term wine online, right? But hundreds of thousands of people search for their brand online, right? And what they've just done is, so they did really clever things from an acquisition standpoint. They put newsletters or they put postcards in Amazon delivery. So when you get your Amazon package, you see an advert about naked wines in your package. So just clever acquisition tactics is what they employed. But most importantly, what makes them thrive as a business is the fact that they're really serious about retention. They actually even have a customer retention director whose remit is to ensure they don't lose customers. It's a concept called churn, in SaaS e-commerce. They don't want to churn, so they try and improve and optimize the experience as often as possible. So these are all the things that make subscription commerce work. Curation is important, having that variety. Trial is also important, first 30 days. Convenience is important, very, very important, both at the start of the customer journey to the end of their first and over their period while they're customers. You need to be Amazon proof. If that many, 43% of people start their product searches from Amazon, you need to be Amazon proof from your business model. You don't want just a commodity you can get anywhere else. You can get in a Tesco, you can get in an Argos. You want to be different. You want to create a new experience. Scalability, scale. Think wide and big. So the next model I want to talk about is flash sales. Who's heard about flash sales? Okay, good. 2 people. What's your favorite flash sales website? Okay. For the rest of us, how it works is there's a deal, basically, and the deal would be like for 5 days or one week, and the deal is like seriously discounted. So like these guys, Secret Sales, could sell maybe like Ralph Lauren shirts for 20 quid or 30 quid. I don't know what prices, but they sell something really, really cheap, and they have limited stock. What they do is they typically go to the manufacturers themselves, cut out a deal from their overstock, get so much stuff, and
is that like Groupon? Or?
It's slightly different. So Groupon is more a daily deal site, and with Groupon, what would typically happen is I'm trying to, Groupon, yes, it's kind of like a liquidation. So if like I was selling Macs and I couldn't really sell all of them, I could take it to Groupon for a deal. But it's kind of like my proactive decision to work with Groupon as a platform. These guys are platforms that every single day there's a deal on their website. So it's more or less the place to go. You go to Groupon, yes or no. Anyway, it's kind of like Groupon, but not really Groupon, if that makes sense. A lot of them are into fashion. So No More Rap is like an Amazon for it, but they're in America. Fascinating growth. And a lot of the time, when you buy stuff through the time-limited flash sale, actually it is like Groupon. you're right. It is like Groupon. When you buy stuff from a Flash Limited website, what typically happen is that you would not get it the next day. There'll be like 5 days, 3 days delivery, even a week. So key thing is deep discounting, and the other is time urgency. So they expect you, the deals only last for so long. Okay. One other thing is that they're membership driven. So most of the time they lock themselves out from Google. So they're just membership sites where you have to register to see the deal. Okay. That's no more rack. Fascinating. And the fact is that these guys were hardly any like VC funded. It was just a dude and friends with some small capital from angel investors, and this is what they've been able to do. Yeah. Tom just raised money without outside funding. So really, this is for kids again. The daily deal site for kids, and that's a growth. What do I want to say about flash sales? I think that's pretty much, so the key thing there is it's a membership site. There's the deep discount and the time limited deals. Okay. Now, bricks and mortar, experiential e-commerce. The fascinating thing was like we were trying to bring the physical world to digital in the past, and now a lot of brands are trying to bring digital experiences to the physical. So a lot of them are going bricks and mortar, right? And one interesting company is Warby Parker in America. They started purely online. Glasses are very tough sell online, just due to size and fit. And they said, you know what, we've grown so much, but we think we could even grow further if we have more or less showrooms where people can try their glasses, return their glasses in high traffic areas based on the data. We know that 10% of our customers are in New York, and if we could set shop up in New York, we could increase revenue by X amount. So they set up shopping, in very, very high traffic cities, right? And so they were an online first company, retail company, that are moving, to the physical world. This is another one called Frank and Oak in the States again. Again, online first fashion, and then they're reliving the experience and bringing that experience, offline from online. So one thing you should, one thing they're also doing is pop-up shops. So if it's too expensive, retail can be expensive to set up and maintain. People are just setting up pop-up shops in very high traffic areas at peak periods, for instance. You could see pop-up shops around over the Christmas period because there are lots of people, happy people, with their credit cards wanting to spend, and they're high traffic areas. So you could experience online brands offline. Try before you buy experience. This is more, so I don't know who's heard of Warby Parker? No. Okay, so typically if you wear glasses and you wanted to buy glasses online, what I used to do is I would walk into my high street. I'd go into I'll try glasses on the high street. I really like one. I'll take the product, cheeky, but I'll take the product number because I have a lot of time. And I'll go to Google, search for it, and I will find it cheaper online. And since I already know my VC measurement, I would just send them my VC measurements and take all my prescription specs to them, and I get my glasses delivered to me. Well, that's a lot of hassle. And a lot of people were doing that because these guys need to pay for their retail space. And as compared to an online retailer who they stack stuff up in a warehouse, and when you order, their picker goes there, picks it, puts it in, gives it to the postman, and it comes to your door, right? So what these guys said was like, okay, you know what, let's get their credit card details, just their credit card details. We're not going to charge you at all. We're going to put 5 glasses in a pack for you. Send it to you for free, nothing attached. Just take it for 5 days, make sure you return it to us. There's a free return slip in which you can return. What people were doing was they were trying it in their offices. So it was just not one person trying it. They say, oh, what do you think about it? And then people were taking pictures, Instagramming it, tagging them, Twitter, and they just exploded. As in, their name just went like, pow, well. So, so people were not only buying from them, but they were doing the marketing for them. Right? So again, that's like disruptive thinking there. There's some UK copycat shops and there's some US copycat shops, as you can imagine. But the first starter advantage is there. So that's the try before you buy, where they couldn't have paid Google anything to get them to the number of hands for people to actually test and experience their product. So it is really important well, it's just good to know. Right. Trunk Club, interest into men's outfitters, the men who don't, who accept that they have no style. These guys said, you know what, let's take all that trouble for you, we'll style you up, and we'll put your stuff in a box. And they've grown to a $100 million company in 5 years. And they were acquired by a Nordstrom, which is like a Debenhams, Nordstrom in America. Again, they thought about an industry. Lots of men have that problem. Perhaps for a good part of their life, they're styled by their moms. Then they had a girlfriend for 5-7 years and broke up with that, and then they had no style. But yeah, that's just the way it goes. With
About 10 minutes left.
Pardon?
It's about 10 minutes before the end.
It's 10 minutes, yeah. So we're no boss. I'm not going to go through too much about these guys. Now, the final thing is, how many of you have a blog or blog? One blogs. Okay, good stuff. Is it a fashion blog or a fashion blog? Right. This would be interesting to you. Right. Hawkberry. They're an editorial. So what they do is like they turn an e-commerce business. Imagine GQ, the magazine GQ, that now has a shop, and they sell through email. So they would tell you a really nice story about the best fishing rods. They give you history about a pair of boots that their grandfathers used. They give you brands, they introduce you to new brands, right? And off the back of that, they sell you stuff. But they're like the definitive guide for cool, for for urban men in the US, for style and all that kind of stuff. And it's not just style, it's lifestyle. So they're an editorial first company that happen to sell. And it's worked for them, right? It's worked massively for them. I don't have revenues, but it's in hundreds of millions, and they're not funded. They're started by 2 guys. Blog first approach, fashion blogger. These guys were blog. They used to just blog about trainers, and right now they're a full swing e-commerce store. They still have their editorial at the core, but it's all just the kind of stuff they sell is very well curated. So they curate their stuff based on their style on their blog, and they sell it off the back on their website. I think they're based in Hong Kong or in US. Is it? Okay, so the final thing I'm going to talk about is direct-to-consumer e-commerce, where you think about stuff, you build stuff, and you don't look for the traditional retail channels to sell your stuff, but you sell your stuff direct to consumers on your website, or you look for, you have an Amazon store, you set shop there, and you sell straight to your website, and you don't have any other retail outfits that actually sell your stuff. And Some of you might have come across on Podlock. They were started off from Kickstarter, so you find a lot of crowd-funded stuff, companies or product companies actually selling direct to consumer off the back of the awareness built from a crowdfunding campaign. Again, in fashion, you're finding fashion companies in the UK, ASOS, Boohoo, they're all direct to consumer, where they build brands from scratch. And they almost manufacture almost all the stuff they sell. ASOS is a hybrid, they sell some other brands, but I think Boohoo.com just produced their stuff. Stuff is on Kardashian 2 weeks ago. They have the style as seen on, 2 weeks after. So yeah, direct to consumer is another kind of, and it's big. It's based on scale. I'm not going to talk too much about the platforms for measuring. These are like customer retention platforms. So I'll just end with saying there are 3 things you need to sort of understand for growth. One's product market fit, which pretty much is, here's our product, is there really a market for it? And if there's a market, how do we disrupt that market? How do we gain market share? The second is scalable customer acquisition. So even when we go and acquire, the customers, how scalable is the acquisition? Is it just going to be a one-off campaign where we get customers, and off the back of it, we're thinking about the next thing to do, next 2-3 things to do again? You need to think about Warby Parker, where they acquired a customer, and that had an exponential effect to acquiring, to getting like 20 other eyeballs to see that one set of products, and acquiring customers that way. So word of mouth marketing. So your customer acquisition should not just be, oh, I'm going to buy Google AdWords. It should be, how am I going to create a viral loop effect where when people see my product, they can tell other people. And that will depend on the quality of your product, if there's a wow effect. If there's a wow effect, people will just get out their phones, Instagram it, in a flash, in the kind of world we live in, with the social media world. So how are we going to sort of get that social viral effect for people to be talking about the stuff we do? So that is part psychology, part clever creative marketing, and part math. So it's having all those left-right brain approach to things. So customer acquisition is another, and then retention is what's a long game. How are we going to keep these customers? We don't want a one-time encounter with them. We want to keep them as customers long term. How do we get your business? How do we keep your business? So these are really, really important concepts. And finally, frictionless commerce. Just think about how friction-free things are going to be. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but findability is important. How do people find your brand? What's your value proposition, as I said earlier? How do they engage the brand? What's the actual user experience? Not just on the website, but post purchase. How quickly do you fulfill and return it? So that's about it. It's wrapping up everything I've talked about, and that's me. Connect with me on Twitter, and like, any questions, please? Yeah, please.
So going back to your brick and mortar aspect, I always found it quite interesting because obviously there was a time about 7 or 8 years ago where articles were coming out all the time saying that the high street is disappearing because of all these online shops. It's quite interesting that you're saying that this brick and mortar aspect is now reversing that. Do you think that's a trend that in the future that more online businesses will then decide, business as well, let's just go to the high street again?
Okay, one of the key things about bricks and mortar, one of the key principles is footfall. I have a friend who runs a couple of shops, and there's a big difference placing a shop in one corner of a street, on a high street, as compared to another corner. Sometimes that corner might have high footfall, but it might be transitional traffic. And then that other side of and this is real because this is in Oxford where I live, could be lower footfall, but people are ready, because they're around the shopping centre, the intent there is higher. So I think there would be certainly moves towards, they're taking steps. So if you look at UK brands like ASOS, they're running events at the moment where they're actually meeting fashion bloggers, meeting people in person. And I think one of the lever points that they're going to eventually want to explore would be getting a bricks and mortar presence, which could start off from being a pop-up shop for a few days, for a month, in certain areas, getting feedback, and if the feedback is good, they'd establish. But in terms of like reviving some, desolate town, a town where everybody's leaving, I don't think there's any hope from that perspective. But high traffic areas like London, lots of places in London, Birmingham, Liverpool, there, some funny areas there. Birmingham, all those areas, all these high traffic cities, there is opportunity. And what they're going to do is they're going to look at their data and say, okay, where are customers actually buying? And that's going to guide their direction. So it's going to be a lot more data driven and not just the point, where they...
It's more like a hybrid model where you sometimes buy it online and sometimes get it for full.
Yeah, and just to add to your point, a lot of people are using the high street, they're leveraging the high street to improve experience. So when you buy from a lot of retailers, they're using W.H. Smith, they're using stores M&S as pickup. Click and collect, exactly. But they're taking strides towards actually moving. And I think if you have that viral coefficient where you know there is an experience which is gaining traction through like social signals and word of mouth, then it's more or less a signal for you to say, okay, I actually should experiment a physical presence. But if it's just a normal e-commerce business with nothing to it, then I would step back a bit on that. But yeah, that viral loop is really important.
Earlier on you were talking about the fact that you would advise companies to, when they're building their brand, to spend on advertising on television. I'm just interested to know whether you mean TV as in normal terrestrial television, or whether that includes sort of video, online, things like that, because everyone's talking about moving away from the kind of broadcast and
Yes.
above the line. So I just wondered what you would advise.
My personal experience with the clients of mine that experimented with television last year was their business. So they saw growth. Basically, their website, from a 30-second commercial, national. Actually, it was not even national. It was for a particular area in the country. There were thousands of visits at that point in time, and some of them resulted to sales. And it was sustained eventually. So there was a burst. But when they saw their traffic month on month, there was better traffic going forward. So
Is that dependent on industry, or?
it will be dependent on industry, I suppose. And I think, okay, so a couple of days ago I swapped, what's it called? I know this is anecdotal, it's not really, but a couple of days I swapped energy supply. And the first thing that popped to my head was, it's the Meerkat one, compare the market. I just typed out compare the market. I didn't say, energy, I just typed out compare the market. So being that repetition still has, but the thing is, it's very capital intensive. So you need to be funded to be able to afford it. Another one, I attended locally in Oxford, the owner of, I forget his name, of moonpig.com came in for a session and was telling us about how the challenges he had with his business. He basically lost a lot of money, like almost £100,000 on bad developers and technology. He was like £250,000 in with hardly anything coming in, and his last bet was TV. And he turned around his business, basically, from the feedback he got. There's still that spread. And I think it should be mixed hybrid. So when you see something's worked really well on television, you buy YouTube views. There's now Facebook. And the same thing. So if you're getting good feedback on Facebook and YouTube, you can loop that back to television. It's just territory really, and it's down to affordability. And don't just make it boring, from that perspective.
Can I take the last question?
Sure.
We do need to wrap up. You talked about replenishables being a really tough market to crack. To link to Joe's point about, we're talking about tech companies that really, a lot of them are quite startups rather than developed brands, which is another point you mentioned earlier. What sort of tips would you give companies starting up, not having a lot of money, not having a lot of capital, to build their brands online?
Start with the product. Start with your, okay, so I have a triangle, if I remember, it's a growth triangle, and the way it works is the assumption, so there are two things you need to really think about with the product. Can the product ship conveniently internationally? How expandable is my international focus one? So that's like a given. But the other two things you need to think about, and you need to get one or two right, is one, retention. You need to think about what's a long-term view of my product. At the other end of the corner, you need to think about how can that viral coefficient where, how can I stimulate and trigger cheap word-of-mouth marketing is really important. And if you can get that word-of-mouth marketing, cheaply, especially using social media to amplify the awareness of your product, then you might be onto something. But really, it's I would say, try and avoid building a business that requires Google search, saying, okay, how many people are searching for this product? I'm doing bags, for instance. Okay, so you look at, so there's this Canadian bag brand, and they do leather goods and stuff like that. And what they sell in all their social media is experiences. So the kind of photos they would share on their Instagram, which has hundreds of thousands of followers, by the way, is people traveling, backpacking in a lovely mountain, fishing. So they sell an experience, and they optimize their products. They've worked on, and I'd also say don't shy away from saying, okay, I only own distribution. If you can have a lever point where Debenhams is stocking your stuff and you're aligned with the values of Debenhams, do it. So don't be open-minded with regard to distribution. But if you really want to be direct to consumer, just understand that you own market. It's a tougher sell, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you talked about Graze, for example. It's been a good model of how that works with creative content. Is that more or less?
Sorry, I talked about
Graze being a good example of how you can use creative content and embed an e-commerce model into that.
Yes, Graze.
Was it Graze?
Gracebox.
Gracebox.
Oh, Graze, yeah. You see, the challenge with Graze.com is they own the entire supply chain. It's expensive. They have factories, they have scientists, they have nutritionists on staff. So it's capital intensive. I think they raised money from start to set up Graze. They probably tested the market in a way that they probably had a landing page, mocked images up together, got some Google traffic to test the market, saw that it worked, took that concept to investors, probably got 250 grand in, saw that worked, and then they scaled that to more funding. That's how it typically works. But like I interviewed another lady, she's Ivy Ong. She runs a food subscription business in America. But what she does is she looks for manufacturers. Basically, she chucks them in a box. She doesn't buy from them, they give her samples, and then she sends those samples to her subscribers for about $6 or $10 a month. But yeah, that word of mouth is really important. So what happens, our own viral coefficient in our business is our customers actually do unboxing videos on YouTube, and they open up their boxes when they come in, put it on YouTube, and they get an audience and people learn about her. So basically, her customers are doing the work for her. And the principle or the takeaway really is, when you're building your business out, if there are many ways to building a business, but the way these new breed of businesses have come up is their customers do the marketing for them. And there's so much of a buzz, there's a new experience they've been able to infuse where their customers are doing the work, the marketing for them. It just makes customer acquisition cheaper, in the long haul.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kunle. You suggested we read things like TechCrunch, and you mentioned vlogs.
Yeah,
as well.
TechCrunch is very SaaS oriented, very SaaS, software as a service oriented. But sometimes they make announcements on new investments, and if it's in e-commerce, you could just read their backstory and follow.
I was going to say that there's a vlog. You mentioned vlogs as well, but
yeah.
You got your own vlog.
Yeah, I've got my podcast.
Okay.
Just 2XEcommerce. Just go onto iTunes or whatever podcast directory you use. Subscribe. I try and interview. I interview basically founders of 7-8 figure businesses and marketing experts to support those kind of businesses. And we just chat for an hour. I'll put on board so many people.
On Blackboard if you guys can have a look on.
Brilliant. Thank you very
Thanks very much,
much.
Kunle.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
We should have longer.
Huh?
We should do the
Sorry.
We should do it longer.
Yeah, you wish it was really longer.
Interesting.
Cheers.
We had this.
Oh, that was like split stuff.